Joining us for our webinar today. I'll just wait for a moment just to let a few more people join in. We've just hit 11 o'clock, so I'll just give them a few moments more and then we'll get stuck in. Okay, looks like we have a fair few people have joined us already, so I might start. My name is Sarah Gray, and I'm fortunate enough to look after Sintra HR Outsourcing, which is our HR business within Sintra. We run regular webinars like this, but if this is your first time joining us today, well, a big welcome, and I hope you enjoy it. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to post these in the chat area. And Harry, who's helping me today, will take note of these so we can address them at the end. But if we haven't got time, we'll answer those questions on a Q&A sheet and send them out with a copy of the slide deck for you. So, why are we here today? Quite simply, employers in a recent survey identified that two of their key concerns were rising employee costs and staff retention. And managing probations effectively are a key to addressing both of these things. What we're going to cover today are basically why managing probations are becoming even more imperative than ever before, what to consider when structuring a probation process so that you and your new recruits achieve maximum benefit, how you can set measurable objectives to assist in the recruitment and probation phase, some key things to avoid and do during probation periods, and how to make decisions on whether someone passes their probation or not. One of the biggest changes is the new Employment Rights Bill, and particularly the change to unfair dismissal provisions. It's one of the biggest changes that we've encountered in employment legislation in many years in the UK. Employers will no longer have their 2-year, what I call get out of jail free card, before a claim for unfair dismissal can be made, and claiming unfair dismissal will be a day one right. But this means ostensibly two key things. One, you need to get your recruitment right, and two, you need to manage performance from the commencement of employment from day one. Our attitudes towards probationary periods will have to undergo a transformative change. Probations will not mean, as is often wrongly perceived, as a time when you can terminate an employee with relative impunity. As it stands, there is talk about what will happen to probation periods. And whilst the government has not yet provided specific guidance on this, it is understood that they are planning to create a maximum 9-month probation period for any role, as well as introducing measures that will determine what amounts to unfair dismissal during or at the end of probation period. Some of the likely measures that we're expecting to be introduced to demonstrate fairness will be evidence to justify the decision to either terminate employment or extend the probation, an opportunity for an employee to resolve the issues that gives rise to termination, and potentially a right to appeal that decision as well. Shockingly, statistics show that 1 in 5 new hires leave their role within probation period. That's a lot. This means a great deal of wasted time and money for employers. And let's face it, the cost to recruit someone, the recruitment fees, the time taken to assess and interview applicants, as well as time taken to induct, train, and onboard a new recruit is a very expensive exercise. Having a robust recruitment, onboarding, and probation process certainly helps to reduce this risk. We need to view probation as an opportunity to carefully and properly evaluate the performance, capacity, and cultural fit of a new employee, a way to mitigate risk, not just financially, but also to make sure that you employ the right person in the role, someone who shares the same values as the organisation and is not going to potentially put you at risk of reputational harm, and a way to improve results by improved performance, better retention, and a stronger workplace culture. Before we go into the structure of what to include in a probation period, I want you to think about this. Who in your organization conducts the probation reviews? And how do they make determinations on successful completion of those reviews? Quite often in an organization, the supervisors or line managers who need to do this don't have a great deal of experience. They might have varying levels of capability and skill in this area. So the key question is, how do you prepare your new supervisors to do this effectively? If you subscribe to our advice service, please ask for a copy of our manager's how to guide, and that can be very helpful. If not, it's worth considering providing your line managers support and training on how they go about the probation review periods. Another thing to consider is how long your probation period is stipulated for. Whilst most companies use 3 or 6 months, we know some that opt for 12 months. When you determine the appropriateness of the length of probation, it's worth looking at the type and level of job. Would it be reasonable to presume that you need that amount of time that you stipulate to make an evaluation of suitability? For example, would you really need 6 months to determine if a full time employee making sandwiches at a sandwich shop is proficient at what they do? Probably not. So it might mean too that within one organisation you have different levels of probation that you set depending on the role that those people are performing. If someone was working in marketing, as an example, and required to work on a variety of campaigns and initiatives, you might need 6 months realistically to basically demonstrate their effectiveness in the full scope of what they do. And as I said before, there is talk about a maximum of 9 months being introduced, so we'll keep an eye on that. And what, if any, additional requirements are also put in place as part of that change? Lastly, and very importantly, do the people who are making the probation assessment and final decision on recruitment understand what circumstances impact on determining whether someone fails or meets an extension to their probation? Setting clear and objective goals often causes line managers the most angst. It takes a bit of practice to break a task or an activity down into bite sized, measurable pieces that you can use to objectively evaluate performance. Using SMART goals as a guide can be helpful. So they are specific, measurable, achievable for the role and the level of experience, relevant, so they need to align with the role and the job description, and time bound. What time frame should they be completed in? And what the benefits um, are clearly defined of goals. So they give you clarity, both the line manager evaluating the new recruit and the new employee to help them understand the expectations of what they're meant to achieve. It also serves as a motivational tool. It's like having a to do list where you can tick things off, nothing feels better and more satisfying. So, giving a new recruit a list of things that you would like them to achieve and being able to go through that process of ticking things off incrementally as they go through that period is really motivational. It also helps with accountability. If you establish these issues early, it builds good habits and work practices. In other words, you don't just let people trot off and do their own thing. They are held accountable for what they're meant to be achieving. It helps with better decision making. It gives you the evidence that you need to justify any decisions that you need to make. And lastly, it really helps with efficiency because if you go through this process incrementally, it helps you apply your resources within the department or team for maximum benefit. This is a little bit of a wordy slide, but you'll get a copy of it, so hopefully the detail will help you. What we've set out here are the steps that we propose that you go through during a normal probation period. So, whether it's 3 months or 6 months. One of the most crucial elements of the probation period is the onboarding and setting of targets. So, before you even start to recruit, you should have developed a clear job description and be clear about what you want the employee to accomplish in their role and have ways that you can measure that effectiveness. When thinking about goals and targets, make sure that you consider what is appropriate for the different stages of the probation review and whether they're appropriate for the level of job and whether they're appropriate for the level the person is within that job based on their experience. So it's not a one size fits all approach. An example, if you have an administration apprentice, for instance, they'll have very different goals to accomplish in week one as opposed to a senior administrator with 10 years' experience. In the first week, apart from inducting them into your policies and procedures that they need to follow, you'll also outline your expected standards of behaviour, where they need to find information, and who they need to speak to get assistance. You will also outline what the probation is used for, what goals you want them to achieve during this period, and how you will support them to do this. And very importantly, when and how you'll be assessing them too. So, full transparency. During the first few weeks, you will need to observe their attendance, their interaction with others in the team, and if appropriate, with clients as well, their responsiveness to any task that you've set them. So, example, compulsory training modules that they need to complete. You'll also be looking at their general demeanour. Do they look happy? Do they look content? Do they look concerned or anxious or disengaged? The quality of their work and the time taken to complete the activities that you've set them. The first scheduled check in is usually at the end of month one, and this is where you can provide feedback on what you've observed. As with any assessment, this should be about specifics, so not generalizations. It's also a wonderful opportunity to ask them how they're finding their new workplace, what they like, what they find useful, and how they're getting on with their peers, and whether there is anything that you can do to help them to achieve the goals that you've set them. Ideally, this first review should be documented and any actions identified agreed to. If you are one of our HR admin clients, you can do this in the HRIS system that we provide, or we have a form that you can tailor for your specific purpose. Having that and having it documented and on file is a key way to document that you've gone through this process properly, and particularly if you need to um, extend their probation or if you need to terminate employment, it's something that you would definitely have to rely on. The next formal review usually occurs mid probation. So, this is where you'll revisit any of the actions that you've agreed to in the first review and provide feedback on the performance that you've observed and that you've measured during that time. What, if anything, you would like to see them improve on? What do they need to do to meet expectations if they're not quite there yet? And what help or support do they need from the business? The final review will happen just prior to the end of the stated probation period, although it can happen before if it's deemed appropriate. This is where you make a determination of whether they're going to be offered a permanent role or if there have been extenuating circumstances that require you to extend the probation period. The final review is followed up by a letter confirming the outcome. And of course, the structured review meetings do not take the place of continuous feedback that you have throughout the probation period. This should happen as and when needed. So when you hear or see something that they're doing that's positive, reinforce the behavior, tell them about it. Conversely, if you see them doing something that is not right or quite up to standard, address that in the moment in a timely manner. And here's a couple of do's and don'ts. Most important to note here is the better you start, the better you finish. So set expectations early and keep on the case. It is far better to find out early in the piece if the recruitment decision has not been a good one. Don't avoid having to call out unacceptable standards of behaviors. And trust me, it is far, far easier to have a tough conversation in the first few months of employment than it is to prepare for an unfair dismissal case a year down the track. And here's another thing: mediocre employees rarely leave you, right? Like you want them to. They will continue on and they'll stay. So best to act in the early stages. And look, it happens to the best of us. Recruitment is not a science, and even when you go through the process as carefully and as as fully informed as you can be, sometimes things go awry. One of the key things here is to remember to document everything, and I mean that. This is the way that you save yourself from any potential claim. Document everything. And by everything, we mean conversations, agreement on actions that need to be taken, training that they've undertaken, whether formal or informal, feedback that you get from others, their line managers, from their peers, people who have helped mentor them. And that's why I like to use a form for these sessions, because it allows you to document everything, to have the employee sign off on what you've discussed, and also any agreed actions that you've come to as a couple. Always base decisions on facts and specifics, not generalizations. Support your new recruit. The aim, of course, with all of this is to help them succeed. Re recruitment is expensive. And importantly, please don't use probation extensions to mask the fact that you haven't gone through the process properly. So if you haven't had those probation reviews, as we suggest, it's not a good enough reason to then extend the probation. Extensions should only be used when there is a justified reason for them. So, for instance, it might be when somebody has been absent for a duration of the time and you haven't had the full 3 months or 6 months to properly evaluate. That would be a fair reason to extend the probation period. If there are certain tasks they haven't been able to demonstrate because of the operations that you're involved in, or the things have not occurred naturally within the organisation that have allowed you to assess something specifically, and that's coming up in the next month, you might have reason then to extend the probation so that you can evaluate the performance in that particular circumstance. Quite often, there is a disadvantage of being on a probation period. So, some companies don't offer company sick pay, for instance, during the probation period, or there may be other benefits. So, you could be unfairly disadvantaging somebody by extending the probation for an unnecessary length of time, unless there is a very good reason to be doing that. There are three possible outcomes to a probation. One, they successfully pass and they go on to being a permanent employee. Two, you extend the probation period, as I said before, and this again needs to be justified and needs an action plan of what needs to be demonstrated and evaluated in that extension period in order for them to pass successfully. One point to mention here is please consider how long you need to have that extension for. It's not just a matter of saying, well, our probation period is 3 months, we need to extend it, so we'll just make it another 3 months. What do you need to evaluate, and how long do you need for that evaluation to take place? What would be fair and reasonable? So it's not just another 3 months. It might be that you need another couple of weeks. It might be 1 month. It might be 2 months. But how do you justify what that extension period should be? And the third outcome, of course, is termination of employment. Key message here is that it should never, ever come as a surprise. So when you talk to your new recruit at coming up to the end of 3 months or 6 months, and you say, "Sorry, guys, no, this has not worked out particularly well," um, they shouldn't be surprised by the reason for that. It's something that should have been addressed throughout that probation period, and it should be a case of, remember, we spoke about this not being quite up to scratch. We asked you to do this, this, and this. We gave you this opportunity. We put you through training. We've given you an opportunity to shadow. We've given you these guidelines to follow, but still, at this juncture, you're not meeting expectations. So they are aware beforehand the issues that might be coming up that would mean that their employment is terminated at the end of probation. And of course, nothing stops the daily interaction, as I said before, the continual discussions that you have throughout the probation period. The final review. Basically, this is crunch time. It's usually at the end of the state of probation period, but sometimes where the situation warrants, it can be done before. The key thing to remember about this final review meeting is that you need to be prepared and come to it with all the evidence, both good and bad. It's not just about bad news. I want to stress that probations are a great way of identifying to a new employee what you like about their performance and what you want them to continue as they go forth as a permanent employee of your business. When making a decision, consider the range of factors that you need to, not just performance tasks, but how they have assimilated into their role and how they interact with their peers. This is as much about giving them an opportunity as well to talk about their assessment of the job. It's a two-way street, this probation phase. How are they feeling? Are they supported? How do they feel about the way they're being managed? And what is their view of the business? If you come to the meeting with a foregone conclusion about what you want to be the outcome, but during the course of this review process and this meeting, they address issues which might change your perception a bit or change your mind about whether your initial decision was the right one, you don't have to give them an outcome at that meeting. It might be appropriate to say, I was unaware of some of the things that you've addressed in this meeting. I'd like some time to consider what you've told me. Let's reconvene, and then I can give you an outcome of the decision that I will make on that basis. So don't feel like you have to rush the decision if new evidence or something comes up within that discussion, which might alter how you go about determining whether their probation is successful or not. It's a good time if you're one of our clients to call us and get some advice on this has come up. What do you think I should do? How do you think I should broach this? And of course, any decision that is made needs to be followed up with written confirmation of that decision. Sorry, let me just go to the next slide. I've got an errant mouse on my computer, which is not always behaving. So now it's a timely reminder of the employee rights during probation. Of course, just because they're on probation doesn't mean they don't have the same rights as an employee would. So they have a right not to be discriminated against. They have a right to earn national minimum wage, and they have a right to paid holiday, rest breaks, statutory sick pay, maternity and paternity leave, and very importantly, protection from harassment. So they have all those rights. Where employees do not receive certain benefits during probation, so they must be clearly outlined in their contract of employment. So you need to make sure that you put that in. And if you have a probation policy, that's all good. But if you don't, please speak to us. It's a good idea to have one. Contracts should spell out the duration of the probation period and how a successful probation will be assessed and communicated. It's also prudent to identify that this period may be extended, to have that in your contract of employment. If you don't have that in your contract and you do dismiss the employee in their probation, it may give rise to the potential of a claim for breach of contract. So it's important to have that in there. It's also worth pointing out that probations are for new employees. Sometimes employers might say, well, we're changing somebody from a customer service administrator into a sales role, as an example, and so we'll put them on a probation because it's a new role. No. If they are an existing employee and you are transferring them into a new role, you might very well have a trial period where you can say, let's evaluate whether our recommended change of role is a good fit for you and for us. So let's give it a go. Let's give you a trial period in that. If they fail in that trial period to, or that they don't like the new role that you've put them in, they will always have the right to go back into their previous role. So it's not to be treated like a probation period. What I want to do here is to talk about a scenario. This is where things really kind of, we can put these things into action, if you like. It brings it into the real world. What I'm going to do is, when we've had a look and a talk about this, I'm going to get you to vote for your preferred response to this question. So the scenario is this: Alice has been hired as a customer service assistant for on a 3-month probation. Her final review meeting is not until next week, and her line manager is evaluating her performance, preparing for this meeting, and he's thinking about her conduct over the duration of the probation period. And he has a problem. Alice has been a really good employee. She churns through her tasks really well when she's working with minimal mistakes. And she's already quite adept at using the company software and seems to be handling um, the process as well. She seems to understand what she needs to do. But, and here's the but, her attendance is an issue. Out of the 11 weeks that she's been employed, she's been absent for 9 days. And it's causing operational issues. The other team members are not reacting well to this. They're shouldering the burden of her not being there, and they're not particularly happy with her either because of that. So the question is, what do you think you would do? Now, there's no right or wrong answer here, really, but you've got three scenarios, and I wonder if we can have that scenario up. Let me go to it. No, Ellie, are you able to put the survey up for me? Or Harry, have you got that? Perfect. So it's either, do we pass her, do we extend her probation, or do we terminate her employment? And if you're passing her, I mean, you might say, well, she's a good employee, and to rehire would cause even more disruption. So, don't want to go through that again. So that might be one of the decisions and why you think you would pass her. If you're thinking about extending her probation, then you might make it conditional on her improving her attendance within a set period of time and give her that opportunity. Or you might go, you know what, this is the honeymoon period. And if she's not reliable and performing well now, it'll only get worse. And so I think I'm going to cut my losses and terminate her employment. So you've got your three options. I'm just having a look at some of the responses. I think it's fairly clear what most of you will do. And that is most of you, in fact, 93% of you have suggested that you would extend your probation. And I have to say that I think that probably without knowing all the details, obviously this is a survey where you've got very scant information, but without knowing all the details, I think that might be the safest option. Um, it's not an uncommon scenario. Being absent during probation is one of those things that we all have to deal with from time to time. But like most things in HR, there is no blanket approach. Ideally, you would not be waiting until the final meeting to address this. You would have had a look at the absence as it's occurred during the probation period, and you would have had those conversations about why they were absent. So you potentially know what's causing it. Once you do that, is it something that requires adjustment? Is it something that you can resolve? And you would also look at whether they're following the absence policy correctly. Are they providing you the right notice of when they're absent? And no matter how brilliant they are during the days that they're working, you'd need to evaluate whether that compensates for the time out of work and the drop in team performance. You'd also probably consider what message it's sending to the rest of the team with if you tolerate that level of absenteeism. So having an extension where you clarify that you need them to attend work, you need the reliability, and asking them to adapt to that within a certain time period would might give some comfort to the rest of the team as well, knowing that you are addressing the situation and you're not just turning a blind eye to it and ignoring it. So if you haven't addressed the situation of attendance previously, definitely would opt for an extension. If you have addressed the issue of attendance within the probation period and they haven't fulfilled the obligations even after those discussions, that might be a whole different discussion, and that might result in you terminating employment. One of the things I wanted to address in this, and this is where it becomes even more tricky, is if during the course of that discussion with the employee about their absence and their improbation, they start to talk to you about having a condition which may be classified as a disability under the Equality Act. They might talk to you about having severe anxiety, which affects obviously a mental health condition, which has been ongoing for a number of years. Then you would need to investigate how long this has been occurring for, what treatment they're undertaking, how it impacts on them, whether reasonable adjustments are applicable to put in place to resolve that particular issue. So you need to balance. It's not something that we can cover off all the variables in a discussion like this, but that's the sort of thing that we would expect that you would contact us about so that we can talk you through what investigation you need to undertake to make informed and valid decisions, and decisions that will make sure that we keep you safe as a business for any unfair dismissal claims. So we're looking at how you would broach those issues. There's no one answer to these scenarios, but it certainly brings up the fact that none of these things just have a simple blanket answer, and we help go through these things in more detail so that you can find out exactly what's required. It might be something as simple as having an occupational health assessment to determine whether the job is a good fit for that person before you make a final decision. And that's where our team of advisors come in very handy. And a bit of unabashed self promotion for our next webinar. We're having one on major employment law changes, whether you're ready, and we're going to cover off on a variety of topics there, like third party harassment, the changes to unfair dismissal rules and probation periods. Hopefully, they'll be a bit more known then. Extended time limits for employee claims. That's going to be a big one. The role of the new Fair Work Agency, certainly reforms to zero-hour contracts, neonatal care and pay regulations, and so on. So there's quite a bit that's coming up. We do have an opportunity. You can see a little pop up there if you'd like to register for the next webinar, and hopefully we'll see you at that. Harry, I don't know whether you were able to see if there have been any questions that need answering. We've got a few minutes if there are anything. Or if anybody's got any questions now relating to probation, if you'd like to put them in the chat box, and we can potentially answer those.
Do you know what, Sarah? You've explained everything so clearly that there has actually been no questions.
Oh, Harry, that's a very nice way of putting it. Full marks to you, Harry, for that. Thank you so much. And I hope everybody has had some benefit out of this webinar. If you do have any questions that you think of after the fact, you can always contact us and ask us. We'd be happy to help you go through any of these issues. But hopefully, this gives you a little bit of guidance on how to approach your probation periods in the future. And we wish you very well. And thank you so much again for joining us. We hope to see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye for now.